Welcome to the third episode in our six-part series of writing exercises for applicants and students, delivered by the Creative Writing course team, which is part of the University of Worcester's Department of English, Media and Culture. My name's Jack McGowan, and I'm the course leader for Creative Writing. Each of these sessions has been designed to give applicants a taster of the sort of writing exercises you may experience during a typical class. Current students may also view these sessions and use them as writing prompts for independent study. This session introduces the beautiful in-law, a writing exercise that explores the idea of using writing constraints to kickstart your creativity. The beau présent, or the beautiful in-law, is a writing exercise created by the French writing group known as Oulipo, which was established in the 1960s. One of the key principles of Oulipo, which stands for Oeuvre de littérature potentielle, or Workshop of Potential Literature, is summarized by the Olympian writer Georges Perec. I set myself rules in order to be totally free. Olympians like Perec used rules or constraints in their writing practice in order to help them generate new and creative material. For example, one of Perec's most famous novels, La Disparition, or the English title A Void, was written in French entirely without the letter E. It might seem odd to think about writing as something constrained. It's much easier to imagine writing as being a space where you're allowed to be free. But actually, when we think about it, all writing is written under constraints, be they the form of a poem, the genre of a novel, or even more fundamentally, the language that you're writing in. By harnessing and directing these constraints, we can use them to experiment with our creativity. By posing a problem for us to solve, they can help us access our imagination in new and interesting ways. And ultimately, they can help us move past the paralysis that we sometimes encounter when presented with a blank page. Perec and Olympians were masters of writing under constraint. And there's no problem if you want to start out with a constraint that's less tricky. But it's worth bearing in mind that increasing the difficulty of the constraint will often force us to find increasingly creative solutions. Consequently, if we allow ourselves to be guided by the constraint, we often produce writing that we wouldn't have been able to write without the constraint in place. The beautiful in-law is a piece of writing, or short story, or a poem, which only uses the letters in a particular name. Best to start with something small rather than a whole novel. This is about generating ideas as much as generating finished work. The name you choose could be the name of the person the short story is about. Writers will also sometimes gift a beautiful in-law poem or short story to someone which uses their name as a constraint. The name doesn't have to relate to the content of the writing if you don't want it to. The key is finding a name that works and allows you some flexibility. For example, using my name, I'd only have these vowels and these consonants, which could prove quite tricky. Try breaking your own name down, and if you think it might prove challenging, remember you can use the letters as many times as you want to. You can find creative ways to avoid using a certain letter, such as punctuation to avoid the O in cannot, the abbreviation can't. Here are some examples that use the names of Marvel Avengers. They aren't really about the characters in question. It's just a chance to experiment with the constraint and see what it can produce. Be ready for it to end up sounding like nonsense. But that's okay. Even if the whole thing doesn't make much sense, or doesn't make a very good poem or short story, there may be one or two lines or images that you think are actually pretty good, and that you would never have otherwise imagined or written down if it wasn't for the constraint. When studying creative writing at the University of Worcester, you'll find that often the writing process is just as important as the end result, and these kinds of generative exercises might give you the inspirational idea or the great first line for a new piece of writing that does work and that you're happy with. Thanks for listening to this creative writing taster session exploring the beautiful in-law writing constraint. If you have already applied to study creative writing at the University of Worcester, or if you're interested in applying, please do feel free to get in contact with us using the following email addresses. We're always happy to help.